Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Gay with God podcast, a safe place for us to share our stories and support one another. How long did we know? What challenges did we face? Did we lose our faith? When did we find our way back home? Or are we still searching? The stories you hear on this podcast will melt your heart and strengthen your belief that in God, all things are possible, and you can be authentically gay with the God of your understanding. I am your host, Midge Noble, and I am very honored that you are here. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Gay with God podcast. I am Midge Noble, your host, and also the author of Gay with God, Reclaiming My Faith, Honoring My Story. So today, the Advent word of the day for 2025 was abundantly. And let me read for you what that means to the author, Margaret Ellsworth, who wrote this for us this morning. Jesus is coming that we might have life and have it abundantly, like the crocus popping up with a splash of vibrant color. Before the snow has even finished melting, Jesus is coming that we might live abundantly, not just to survive, but to bloom, not just to serve, but to sing. I loved that, and I love the fact that the flowers were all in purple, and I used to have purple crocuses come up every year, and I do still have them a little bit, not as many as we used to have that were coming up, but a little bit, and every time I see that crocus popping up through the snow or on a really super cold day, I'm reminded that, life is abundant, and it can continue on. But I also thought about how do we define abundance? What is abundance to me? What is abundance to you? And how does that filter into our lives as we live to deepen our relationship with the God of our understanding? Well, when I think of abundance, the first thing that pops into my mind, of course, with maybe many of you is money. We always think about abundance has to be tied to some kind of dollar amount. And because we live in a society where money is so overwhelmingly popular and you need it for absolutely everything, and we don't barter, we don't make deals anymore. We just have to have that hard cash, and we have to have it in abundance in order to live today. As we see prices rising and our jobs may not be keeping up with that, kind of increase that we would like to have as we work hard, abundance and money get linked together. Or we might think of abundance as a whole garage full of, elite cars of every kind of color and every kind of design. Or maybe we think of it as being able to walk into our kitchens and open the pantry and have an abundance of food. And I remember that my wife's grandmother lived through the Depression. And so not only was she very, very good at making things last and not just giving things away or giving them up to the trash when she was done with it, that she would repurpose it, because you just don't throw things out, and you also make sure you have enough. So she would have 6, 7 layers of the same thing. She would just stack them up on these big pantry shelves and make sure that there was always another one, that there was an abundance of food to feed her family. Sometimes we think of it in my world as a plethora of a bunch of corgi butts in the house. That's abundance, is when you have so much, as we call corgi glitter, which is also referred to as fur, that you know that the house is full, and there's lots of pitter patter, there's lots of love to share. And the word love is sometimes ignored when we think about abundance. But I've been on the other side of not feeling a lot of love, and I know that when you start to get love, even if it's a little amount, it feels overwhelmingly abundant. When we think of God's abundance, it always comes linked to knowing that we're going to have more. We will have more life when our earthly life is over. We will have more love than anyone else can ever give us, in the same way that we get the love from the God of our understanding. The love that we have within ourselves that we can give away freely comes directly from the love that God has for us. When we think about being able to open our hearts and continue to be in an abundant nature, not only with ourselves, but with others. So we think about providing grace and knowing that God has abundantly given us grace in our life. And how can we then give grace to others? How do we find within ourselves that abundance of grace and offer it to the people who have harmed us, who intend to harm us, who continue to harm people that we love? God has given us an abundance of peace and wisdom to know what to do and what not to do. We have always been taught to take that abundance of love and peace and offer it into the world. We've also been taught that wisdom is not just talking about everything that we know. Wisdom also comes in the form of staying silent. And we talked about that a little bit in the last episode, is that, that talking is highly overrated. We don't always have to speak. And yet when we do speak, bringing our voices to the light and allowing that light to shine so that we don't cower among people who are trying to take over us. We actually can take that light and put it out in the world abundantly by showing up and doing what we do best, helping our neighbors, taking care of people on the road that you may not even know, but you're going to help them because they need it. By donating things that you don't need anymore, and instead of just trashing them, because that's a little bit easier just to throw it in the trash than it is to find a place that you can donate things to, but to donate those things that you don't need so that others who desperately need them can also have an abundance in their life. And that abundance is just not the thing you gave them. It's that somebody saw them and they felt seen, and then their needs were met. We are all given the chance to grow, to change, to become a better version of ourselves each and every moment of the day. And that takes some wisdom. Wisdom is something that I think we learn from trial and error. We can't just be born with wisdom. Now, I know there are some very smart people that are born with very high IQs, and they didn't do anything to get it. They just have it. And so that's another kind of intelligence, but wisdom comes from the seat of caring, knowing what to do when to speak, when to be quiet, when to give, and when to offer a chance for someone to learn how to do the thing that they need to do so that they don't always have to wait for someone else to provide it for them. It goes back to that story that you can give people fish all day, but if you teach them how to fish, then they are more enriched and they have wisdom that they can then use to teach others to do what needs to be done. The first part of wisdom is actually to observe. We don't just have wisdom, but we watch, we learn, we have trial and error, and we mess up, and we go backwards, and then we find another way because we observe again, and we think it through, and we have trial and error, and then we have wisdom, and we can do what needs to be done. Or the wisdom comes in finding someone else in your circle that can be a partner with you to do a task that is something that you can't do by yourself. So abundance is more complicated than money, and it's also more freeing than money. Money can tie you down in ways that you can't really describe, but it's this weight that if once I have it, I have to keep having more because what I have is never enough. When we start to take our abundance of money and we put it out into the world to secure more things, then we have to protect those things. Then we have to worry about those things. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have monetary things that we love. We just need to make the balance of our abundance to be something that doesn't weigh us down. And sometimes things weigh us down in a way that we can't predict before we have those things. The wisdom to know the difference between taking in abundance and giving abundance of non-monetary values. The things that we share with our besties, the times that we have that make us belly laugh, the times that we have when we just feel so full of love that we can't help but to offer more love to others. That has nothing to do with money, but has everything to do with our peace of mind, our love for ourselves and others, and just that well-being of being connected to a source that is so much greater than ourselves. When we truly allow ourselves to be free from earthly abundance, and we allow ourselves to connect with our spiritual abundance, that only comes from the God of our understanding, then we really truly are abundant. And no one can take that away from us. Nothing can be said, nothing can be done, even if we wind up without the monetary treasures that we've come to love. The true spiritual abundance from the God of our understanding will last our whole entire life because it's in us, not something we've acquired. It's actually something we've been given. And we've been given that with the promise that we will never be left. We will always be in the inner circle of the God of our understanding. And that to me is abundance. Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. Thank you for listening, sharing, supporting, and subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to see more information and links to connect with me or to purchase my memoir, Gay with God, Reclaiming My Faith, Honoring My Story, go to the show page from today at empoweredmidge.podbean.com, and you can find more information and the book link there. Check out our Facebook group on Facebook called Gay with God, where we do a monthly Zoom group entitled My Faith Journey. If you need support to help you through your coming out or faith journey, you can go to that show page at empoweredmidge.podbean.com and scroll all the way to the bottom, and you can see how you can connect with me by doing a complimentary free session with me online through Zoom. And then if you decide that there are things you'd like to work on and that you need extra support, we will figure out then how to get you on a regular coaching schedule. If you are listening to this podcast and are questioning whether you can be gay and be in relationship with the God of your understanding, if you identify as LGBTQIA+, or not even sure if you're gay, God has always been within you. Even when you didn't know it, you have always been gay with God. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned to see how you can join the Gay with God community. And as always, you are loved. I want to invite you to become a part of the Gay with God community. How can you do that? Stay connected by messaging me your thoughts and comments in the comment section under the downloads of the show on the Gay with God show page. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen and share so we can increase our community outreach and be a light to those who are struggling to claim their faith. Consider being a sponsor so I can highlight your service in our community. We are all worthy of respect and a relationship with the God of our understanding. I want to thank you in advance for supporting this podcast. Together, we as a community will keep this show visible and our community stronger. Deep gratitude to my friend Tim McClendon of Tim McClendon Music for allowing me to use an excerpt from Interlude 4, a song found on his CD entitled Sundance.